One thing that we have here is an exhibit, a small exhibit made by our organization on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of many events that happened in Russia. Здесь небольшая выставка, которую наша группа, наша организация устроила из газетных публикаций New York Times 2017 года. Это не только история формального окончания царизма. Почему мы это проводим не в марте, а в сентябре? Потому что 14 сентября 2017 года Временное правительство провозгласило Россию республикой, и это было заявление о том, что Россия хочет быть современным государством. 100 years since the formal end of Tsarism in Russia, and that was a statement that Russia wanted to be a modern state. Но это также столетие отмены черты оседлости, которая была отменена, отмены черты оседлости для евреев, которая была отменена в марте 2017 года. That's also 100 years of the abolition of the Jewish Pale of Settlement in Russia. 100 лет с тех пор, как женщины в России получили право голоса на выборах летом 2017 года. За 3 года до того, как была принята соответствующая поправка к американской конституции. It's 100 years since women in Russia got their voting rights in summer of 1917, which was 3 years before the US passed its constitutional amendment on this subject. Can you think about that? Russia was leading the West on this topic at the time, which was considered, women's voting rights was considered part of the socialist agenda. Just think about it. И, кроме того, это 100 лет с тех пор, как Украина и другие части Российской империи заявили о своих планах на автономию, а затем и на независимое государство. It is also 100 years since Ukraine and some other parts of the Russian Empire declared their intention to be autonomies and then independent states. I think that at least on this list of topics, there is at least one that is relevant to some people here in this room. So what else was important 100 years ago? It was that immigrants from the Russian Empire, obviously most of them Yiddish-speaking, but also Russian-speaking, were the largest immigrant group here in New York. 100 лет назад иммигранты из Российской империи были самой крупной иммигрантской группой в Нью-Йорке. And this was before the years of mass deportations and crackdown on immigration from Eastern Europe, known as the so-called national origin quotas, the legislation that was adopted in the 20s, and then the Iron Curtain on the Soviet side. And only by 1960s, as a result of all this and many other events, we ceased to be immigrants from Russian Empire, from countries of the former Russian Empire, ceased to be the largest. И только после массовой депортации иммигрантов из Российской империи после революции и принятия законов, ограничивающих въезд из Восточной Европы в Соединенные Штаты, а также появление железного занавеса с советской стороны, после этого иммигранты из России стали сокращаться в численности, но только в 60-е годы они перестали быть самой крупной единицей иммигрантской, и латиноамериканцы стали вышли на первое место в Нью-Йорке. What about today? The good news is that we are still around and we are the third largest linguistic minority, both in the city and in the state. And yet our community needs a lot of tender loving care, as they say in sales. Because unlike many other, even much smaller groups, our communities have no functioning institutions funded to provide regular services to our people by our own professionals, no paid organizers, in most cases no offices, and no paid political leaders. And the same is true for the smaller post-Soviet communities, some of whom will also be speaking today. And as long as we don't have this foundation of civil society, we cannot elect anybody to represent our immigrant group in government. If some of the people get elected, they end up representing other interests and eventually disappear without even having any viable candidate to succeed them from among our own people. Я говорю о том, что, несмотря на то, что мы до сих пор все-таки крупная иммигрантская община, русскоязычная третья по величине, мы отличаемся резко от большинства других иммигрантских групп тем, что у нас нет своих действующих институций, учреждений, которые бы предоставляли помощь, услуги своим людям, приехавшим из стран бывшего Союза. В результате отсутствия такой базы гражданского общества в диаспоре мы также не имеем политического представительства, мы не можем избрать ни одного политика из числа иммигрантов, который бы удержался во власти и еще мог бы потом предложить какого-то следующего человека в качестве кандидата занять это место. Our leaders are most highly educated. Immigrants are not being hired in some of key areas, including into the government, into the management of large corporations and educational institutions and large non-profits that serve as supposed to serve immigrants, regardless of their origin, language, race, and creed. Except for a few talking Russians, someone whose mother is a Holocaust survivor, I have to say, regrettably, that even though Russian Jews, Jews from the Soviet Union, most of whom are coming from Holocaust survivor families, unlike most American-born Jews, they make 20% of the entire Jewish population of New York, but they have only less than 1% of senior decision-making or any kind of important positions in Jewish communal institutions, and less than 1% of Jewish communal funding. And we're talking about funding from major organizations where CEOs are getting paid $500,000 or more. Sometimes some of them end up stealing some more money, end up going to jail, but not much changes. There are many reasons for our disadvantages, including some of the stereotypes that are besieging our community, and I just mentioned briefly 4 of them that we are actually want to dismantle today. First is the geographic stereotype. The claim that all our people live in South Brooklyn, and those who don't are so few that they don't matter. Well, we are defining it here because we are coming here from all parts of the city, and even we have some folks from upstate. Первый из стереотипов, который нам мешает, то, что считается, что все наши люди живут в Южном Бруклине, а вот нет, вот здесь вот у нас люди из Квинса, из Манхэттена и даже из апстейта, кто приехал. Second is the religious stereotype. And we are also breaking it today because you'll hear from speakers who are Jewish, who are Christian, and even Muslims, and others who are mostly secular folk. Third is the ideological stereotype, especially abused by some in the media, which says that our people are somehow all conservative, materialistic, prejudiced against other races, sexist, homophobic. Not true. As any other ethnic group, we have a wide variety of views, and this forum is intended to give the voice to some of those progressive views that have difficulty getting heard. You'll hear shortly from our people and organizations that are closely allied with racial minorities, immigrant rights movement, who fight for LGBTs, and those Russians who have been protesting in front of their own consulate against the occupation of Crimea. Третий стереотип, который очень мешает нашим людям, это идеологическое представление о том, что у нас вот все такие консервативные, все очень ориентированы на только материалистические ценности, какие-то испытывают предрассудки по отношению к другим расам и всякие другие вещи, которые на нас навешивают. На самом деле у нас очень широкий спектр. And finally, the demographic stereotype, saying that our immigration from our countries has essentially ended. That's nothing could be further from the truth, because the numbers show that we have about 10,000 people from Russia, 10,000 people from Ukraine, only green card recipients every year. Последний стереотип — это демографический, что у нас как бы закончилась иммиграция. Это не так. Каждый год только грин-карты получают примерно 10 тысяч человек из России, 10 тысяч с Украины. И за последние 10 лет около 300 тысяч иммигрантов из бывшего Союза стали американскими гражданами. Now, moving to the end, I want to say a few words about the elephant in the room. Хочу сказать несколько слов, но не надо переводить, наверное. The elephant in the room, if you extend your hand, everyone can feel it here, right? It's the wild beast from the zoo from which many of us have escaped. And this is the Kremlin factor. This is Russia's internal dimension. And again, we are here as Americans. We are not trying to influence any kind of power struggle and do not want and should not be getting involved in any power struggle in Russia. But we are in a free country and we can say what we think. And I have to say that in today's Russia, we have gone back to what was before 1917, close to that type of one-man rule, that has destroyed, in some cases, physically eliminated its opponents and all the institutional balances that still existed, violated the territory of its closest neighbors that its predecessor had recognized as foreign, and whipped up anti-American and isolationist rhetoric, allowing Russian-American relations to go back to a Cold War state, and has shown disregard for the interests and needs of the Russian-speaking American diaspora, and has tried to impose its own autocratic as well as oligarchical structures, a vertical hierarchy on our organizations through oligarchical media empires that are buying up independent Russian language media, И пытается также, эта власть также пытается влиять на диаспору, помогая через своих структур, скупая средства массовой информации и так далее. And we have entered into a vicious circle whereby what is done in Russia somehow exacerbates some negative feelings toward our people. This translates back into Russia, strengthening authoritarian tendencies there, and this is a vicious circle that needs to be broken. Of course, there is never one side to be blamed for that. Я хочу сказать, что мы оказались в таком порочном круге, когда действие, то, что исходит из России, оно как бы способствует негативу по отношению к нашим мигрантам, изолирует их от остальной части американского общества, это в свою очередь транслируется в Россию разными способами и укрепляет власть антизападных авторитарных сил. And we cannot do a lot here, but we at least can do what we can. And for this, we, as Regina has announced, are creating a new thing. We want to have all of you part of what will be a Citizens Council on Russian-American Relations. Мы приглашаем всех, кто здесь находится, стать участниками гражданского совета по российско-американским отношениям. And it will be not about government relations, which you can't influence. It will be about human relations among different groups and trying to help understand each other better and reduce those tensions that are created by governments sometimes. And I want to conclude by thanking my members of the board of directors that I have here. Я хочу закончить поблагодарить членов Совета, директоров русскоязычного Совета Манхэттена и Бронкса, которые 6 лет уже ведут со мной эту организацию, Виктор Левин, который сидит здесь справа, Сильвия Рябичева здесь находится, Вика здесь тоже член нашего совета, Виктория Гурченко, Люба Барзман, я не вижу, здесь она или нет. В общем, я хочу всех их благодарить. Мы отмечаем также 6 лет нашей организации. I just wanted to thank my members of the board of directors, some of whom are here.